There we go. Hello, Joy of Joys, trying to make sure everything works right. We're going live in under 3 minutes. This is going to be an interesting show today, people. I have Clare Lopez joining me. And I think you'll be surprised at her comments. I am someone who believes in saying good things when good things happen and, being just calling out things that are not as well. Doesn't matter who the people are. Sometimes we just need to tell the truth. I think you'll find what Claire has to say about MBS shocking. I've been following the story, I believe, for 4 years. I believe this happened in 2018, somewhere around there. I think it's 3 or 4 years. There was a discussion we had. We weren't sure if it was 2019 or 2018 this happened in. But my take on this story originally was different than Claire's. So, again, she is someone whose opinion I value greatly. So when we get into this, you'll be surprised. 1 minute. Yeah, let me put on my headset and switch sound over so you don't hear them. All right. Oh, joy of joys. Trying to get everything ready. Here we go. About to go. This is going to be a fun show. Wait till you see what's happening this week. It's nice to see you, XYZ. Wait and see everybody else come in. It's been low numbers lately, but that's okay. 5. Hello, welcome to the Sutliffian report. Today we have Clare Lopez joining us to talk about MBS and Saudi Arabia. There have been some positive developments and some surprises when I sought an answer to a story, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. Basically, I had been following CNN's redo of the murder of the Muslim Brotherhood reporter in a Saudi embassy. And, I had watched that story with interest, wondering, what actually is true since CNN was doing all the reporting and seemed to be accurate. But again, when you're fake news, it's hard to ever be trusted. And what I learned from Claire is that much different than what CNN has to share. So, as this is a Christian news show, I want to get first into the scriptures and then we'll get into the interview. So I want to talk about 1 Corinthians 15, verses 1 to 11 today. Moreover, brethren, I declare unto you the gospel which I preached unto you, which also you have received and wherein you stand, by which also you are saved, if you keep in memory what I preached unto you, unless you have believed in vain. For I delivered unto you first of all that which I also received, how that Christ died for our sins according to the scriptures, and that he was buried, and that he rose again the third day according to the scriptures, and that he was seen of Cephas, then of the 12. Cephas is Peter. And after that he was seen of above 500 brethren at once, of whom the greater part remain at this present, but some are fallen asleep. After that he was seen of James, then of the apostles, and last of all he was seen of me also, referring to Paul, as of one born out of due time. For I am the least of the apostles, that am not meet to be called an apostle, because I persecuted the church of God. Again, this is Paul speaking. But by the grace of God, I am what I am, And his grace which was bestowed upon me was not in vain, but I labored more abundantly than they all. Yet not I, but the grace of God which was with me. Therefore, whether it were I or they, so we preach, and so you believed. Now, Paul is telling us that there is no gospel, no good news apart from the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. This gospel is a truth, a message that Paul was not the first to receive. In many ways, he was the least of the apostles. Paul was not with Jesus as he lived and breathed, teaching his disciples, nor does he claim to be present at the death of Christ. He lauds those who knew of the risen Lord before himself. This is important. Why? Because today there are people out there who claim Paul was the inventor of Christianity. There are actually high school social studies textbooks out there, which I have seen, that claim that claim this. Okay, it's shocking. When I saw that, it was in this advanced placement textbook. Yeah, they're trying to teach the smart kids that this is all fabrication. Paul goes on and speaks of 500 or more who knew the risen Lord Jesus before he did. Paul may appear to have had a larger footprint in time from his work sharing the gospel, but as he states, he was not the first. And it doesn't matter who was first or last to believe. It matters that the risen Lord Jesus was preached and that you believe. Dear Lord Jesus, you first loved us. You came to show us how to live and then died, taking the burden of our sins upon yourself. Your resurrection proclaims your glory. This is good news we all must share. Lord, embolden us. Use us to share the great news of what you have done for us. In Jesus' name, amen. So today I want to share with you some incredible video I have that I interviewed this week with Clare. Now, Clare Lopez is an outstanding expert on pretty much all things Middle East. Now, Clare Lopez is a former CIA operations officer. She was one of the first interviewed for the National Security Advisor post with President Trump. You have to, when you hear her talk, she is a bundle of information. She's not your average person because she stays informed. I think some of us get tired of being informed sometimes. I know I do. I'll be honest, I do at times, but I'm addicted to being informed at this point because I feel that unfortunately in today's society, people are not staying informed. And this bothers me to no end. So with that said, I'm going to be starting this interview. I just got to get a few more things ready. Apologize, just making sure everything is ready here. And here we go. All right. The Sutliffian report. Today I have with me Clare Lopez, a good friend, and I have to say one of the people whose opinions on the Middle East I highly respect. She's former CIA operations officer, and her knowledge of what's happening over there is continually getting updated. So I saw the CNN spiel on MBS, and I contacted Clare and I said, I'm just curious what you thought. And so and what the things that have been going under Obama 2.0 that are so negative about Saudi Arabia. So I called Clare and I asked her, she mind talking about the things that are going on in Saudi Arabia that are good, and the stuff that's been going on under MBS, and maybe comment on CNN's spiel. CNN is what we consider fake news, so how much can we really trust? So let's go ahead.
Sure. So you contacted me and you asked after watching that CNN spiel about the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, the son of the King Salman, and what I thought of Saudi Arabia, the direction it's going, the direction that really the crown prince is taking it, because the king himself, Salman, is quite on up in years. He is still king, and his policies are still ruling the kingdom, but he has delegated a lot of responsibility to his now, I think he's 36-year-old son, the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, popularly known as MBS. And just before we started here, I was mentioning to you about my memory of when President Donald Trump then went to Riyadh in May of 2017, his first foreign trip abroad after taking office. And King Salman had gathered all the Sunni leadership of the Islamic world, or practically all of it, in Riyadh, not the Shiites, but the Sunni leadership. And it was that group that President Trump went to speak with, to address. And I was giving a talk, as I recall, up on Capitol Hill about it. And it's the first time that the words tectonic plates are shifting came to my mind. And I said that there is something going on here that is momentous. And indeed, as things played out, of course, at the time, we didn't know all about what was going on behind the scenes. And behind the scenes in Saudi Arabia, the contacts that later would blossom into the Abraham Accords, that is the agreements by the first four, in any case, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, Sudan, and Morocco, to reach, full relationship, a full opening of relationship with Israel, normalization of relationship with Israel. Those talks were just about underway, or beginning to be underway. In fact, really the discussions between Israel and Sunni neighbors had been going on a long time before that. A lot of that had to do with just very practical matters. Business, for example. Israel has a tremendous amount to offer, in terms of technology, medical advancement, water management, all these things. And the four countries we've just named, have never actually been at war with Israel, as have been Egypt and Jordan, which both have peace treaties with Israel, but not full normalization of relationships. And that's a different thing. So tectonic plates moving under MBS, but a few more things going on that are within the kingdom itself. And this too, I think, is a reflection of the influence of MBS, and also his tremendous popularity among the younger set, the younger generation in Saudi Arabia. I don't know what the number is, something like 65 or 70% of the population is under the age of 30. I mean, a really large, young population there. And they look to MBS with hope, and a lot of admiration, and they like him. So what is going on? Well, social mores were the first to be relaxed. Now, these are not things necessarily affected by Islamic law or Sharia. Social mores are the things that the kingdom itself, the government, put into place and are now relaxing. Things like allowing women to drive. That's not Islamic law. That was simply a rule of the kingdom. Well, they can drive now. And they've opened up places like cafes and sports stadiums, um, and other, popular meeting places for both genders. I mean, they're not segregating them anymore. Um, the power of the mutu'ain, that is the religious police that used to patrol the streets looking for, I don't know, girls and boys texting each other or something. Their power has been drastically curtailed. I mean, they're gone. They're just not even there anymore. Um, MBS is the one who put the Wahhabi clerics in jail. Yeah, I mean, dozens and dozens of the Wahhabi establishment clergy are in jail. And then, of course, the entire clampdown against the Muslim Brotherhood. Saudi Arabia used to be the foremost world sponsor of the Muslim Brotherhood. Sponsoring and funding things like the building of mosques, Islamic centers, staffing with the imams, publishing of textbooks and other kinds of books worldwide. And of course, the backing for the Muslim Brotherhood in the United States. That's all gone. It's not there anymore. The Saudi government, because, I mean, and again, a lot of these things are about survival of the royal family. It's not out of the goodness of their hearts that they're doing these things. It's for survival. And we understand that. But it's okay, because the things that they're doing are good things in our perspective. We want them to do these things. We appreciate it when they do, especially removing the support for the Muslim Brotherhood, for example, in the United States. As I've said, it's not Saudi Arabia anymore. I think some kind of decision probably was taken at the level of the OIC, Organization of Islamic Cooperation, of course, 57-member worldwide organization of all Muslim governments. And the baton was sort of passed from Saudi Arabia to Turkey. Turkey is now the global sponsor of the Muslim Brotherhood, not Saudi Arabia. So all of these things I see as positive. The Abraham Accords would not have even gotten off the ground without the subtle, discreet backing of the Saudi government behind the scenes. And then one last thing I want to mention, and this is what really took me aback, and it was last year, that it would be in 2020. The Supreme Court of Saudi Arabia formally banned flogging as a punishment for crime in the kingdom. Completely banned it. Now, the reason this took me so much by surprise, happy surprise, of course, is that flogging is a hudud punishment. That is prescribed punishment for prescribed, proscribed hudud crimes straight out of the Quran. And this is the first time that I've ever seen at the top, the government level, Supreme Court level of Saudi Arabia, that they have taken any kind of formal step like this that opposes. It's against Islamic law, against Sharia, but they've done it. And I think that is an immensely positive step.
That was a surprise when we think about any time that they would take a step against Sharia. It's, yeah. And yeah, it is right there. You're saying, it's right in Sharia. It's right in the Quran. That was something. I know I didn't ask this, but did you see the humorously truthful piece on the Taliban seeking financing for climate change?
Oh, yes. Yeah, the request apparently has been made of I guess it's the United Nations or something, to pony up some funding so the poor Taliban, which just the income from the heroin crop, the opium crop, just doesn't cover it all. And they want some assistance with funding for climate control. Yeah, that'll be happening. Well, it may be happening, actually. I can't imagine what the Afghans are going to be doing about climate control. For one thing, I don't even think they have any CO2 emissions. They don't have very many fume emitting vehicles, for example, or factories or anything else. I mean, I don't know, maybe it's the goats and the sheep. I'm not quite sure.
Maybe they're going to take AOC's advice and put corks in their cows and goats. I saw that. I just had to laugh. It's nice to end on a humorous note for once.
Yeah, the not humorous part of that is that the UN very well might accede to that request. They just might.
That's kind of scary. Unfortunately, it's not surprising, considering who's running things these days. Yeah, I don't think people pay attention, but I'm one of those people that would be okay with the UN taking their business elsewhere. But I don't know. I mean, you can't trust that organization to do anything positive.
Well, they're all woke these days, and the recently concluded conference of the Paris Climate Accord that was held in was it Brussels?
Is that's the one where Joe had his nice nap, right?
Yes, that is the place. That conference that just recently concluded, was not attended by the biggest emitters on Earth, meaning China for one.
Yep.
Russia and Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, did not attend either. But they're gonna, they're gonna help Afghanistan. That'll do it. That'll keep temperatures from rising and the glaciers from melting and the oceans from rising, and that'll do it.
I hope someday we start to look at science and actually start using it again. Well, thank you for giving me the few moments. I would please tell people how to follow your work, Stella, and how to help you if there's anything they can do to help as well.
Yes, well, thank you so much for having me. Glad to join you on the show anytime. We didn't get to everything yet, like the killing of Jamal Khashoggi.
Oh, do you want to go over that?
I could comment on that
Yeah.
while we're still talking about Saudi Arabia here, and that is that indeed Jamal Khashoggi was a sympathetic writer, columnist towards the Muslim Brotherhood. Some of his writing had been published in the Washington Post in the past, and in October of 2019, is that right?
I believe so.
He went to the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, Turkey, to obtain paperwork that he needed because he wanted to marry a Turkish woman who was waiting outside for him as he went in for the paperwork. Well, he never came out. He was murdered in there, apparently by a hit team from Saudi Arabia, which then apparently dismembered his body and we do not know what with it. The blame immediately was leveled at MBS, that he was too upset by the criticism coming from Jamal Khashoggi in his writing that he had the man murdered. I'm not completely sure that's the whole story. I have heard at least one alternative explanation, and that is that in the climate, the atmosphere inside of the royal palaces of the Saudi kingdom, it is internecine conflict and feuding on a constant basis. For example, because MBS is quite young, I think we said 36, I believe, he, in the succession line, as crown prince, in line to become king, whenever it is that King Salman passes from the scene, he jumped over a lot of older cousins and other relatives within the royal family who feel it should have been their turn. And literally the knives are out. I mean, this is not hyperbole, and this is not exaggeration. The knives are out for MBS. And I think it very likely, certainly possible, that the killing of Jamal Khashoggi was a setup to get to deflect blame, to aim blame at MBS, to frame MBS, in other words, at a time, remember, when the Saudis are normalizing relationships with Israel, again, quietly, discreetly behind the scenes, yes, but those talks are going on. The Abraham Accords are at least under discussion at this point. And that's not something that everybody's on board with within the kingdom. And to frame up MBS and to also take aim at the Trump administration then at that time, and the good relationship between the United States and Saudi Arabia that President Trump was fostering, I think that very well could have been part of the motivation for having Khashoggi murdered inside that consulate, and the media, of course, jumping on board dutifully immediately to frame up MBS. I mean, that at least to me is one alternative hypothesis. We're probably never going to know for sure, but at least I think it should be considered that there are those within the kingdom and within the palaces of the royal family that would very much like to do away with MBS and the relationships that are, or at least were at that time, building between Saudi Arabia and the United States.
That's what it comes down to. There are alternative theories, and at this point, that's all we have. And it's good to know that there are other possibilities than what's being proposed. And that's great. Thank you for telling us that. Please do tell people how to follow your work. I don't.
Right. So yeah. I do not yet have a website, but I do publish, and my videos and interviews like this one are posted up at the Citizens Commission on National Security at the United West. Also, I have done interviews with the David Horowitz Freedom Center, and specifically with Jamie Glazoff on the Glazoff gang. Published quite a number of pieces, especially on education in America and critical race theory. Have a look at those at Front Page Magazine, both last year 2020 and this year 2021. And then on social media, I'm at Clare M. Lopez on Twitter. Same, my name at Facebook. And you can find me at Lopez Liberty on Telegram. So those are the places to look, and would be happy to have some more followers at any one of those. Thank you.
Thank you. So that interview was fascinating, partly because MBS, who is the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, may not have been Jamal Khashoggi's murderer. That is what has been thought to be true. I like Claire's alternative. Is this, when you start to think about the changes that MBS put in, you have to sit there and be curious. Is he really? I mean, when it first happened, I was like, this doesn't seem normal. Something's not exactly kosher in this story. As the story went on, it got more violent and more disgusting. That's the nicest way I can put it. It did get more violent, and it was a lot more disgusting. I don't want to go into any of the details of that. That is just a little bit too violent for what I would consider a Christian news show. But what I did say in the beginning, and I will continue to say, Jamal Khashoggi was a well-known member of the Muslim Brotherhood. Saudi Arabia had a policy forbidding membership in the Muslim Brotherhood, thanks to MBS. And because of that, there have been some great, good, positive changes. Saudi Arabia is, at this point, not the leading sponsor of terrorism. So that's a positive in the favor of MBS. And in fact, they have stopped one of the Sharia commands, which is the flogging. So again, these are things that we need to look at that are positive. Are we saying that everything is positive in a country that forbids any other religion to be living to be there? Of course not. But there are positive changes, and we should always laud. It doesn't matter who it is or where it's from, but when there's positive change, we should at least look at that and, examine, is that what's going on there, what's happening? And that's one of the reasons I asked Claire on. For those of you who didn't catch as to why I originally did this, is CNN had done about an hour show on MBS, and they were accusing him left and right, off and on, for about an hour of killing Jamal Khashoggi. As this went on, I was really, really concerned. It's CNN, it's fake news. Something seemed to be off. Why would they do this? Again, if you're fake news, you're not really good at telling the truth. So, you have to sit there and wonder what was going on. And as I said, when I first did an article on Obama, also known as Barack Obama, when I first did an article on Obama in Saudi Arabia, it was labeled "Fly in Riyadh." It was on a few different places, but in that, I just wrote it as a fantasy because Obama went over there and had to leave in the middle of the night. And my reasoning was this, that he had to leave because the Crown Prince let him know as he got off the plane, and he in there, and my fantasy of this, why he had to leave in the middle of the night, was that this President Obama walked into the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince says, "What are you doing here? You do know that we arrest members of the Muslim Brotherhood, and we happen to have your papers from Egypt. The ones they were talking about that testified to your membership in the Muslim Brotherhood. Either you leave now or we arrest you." So that was my explanation to why Obama left rather quickly from Saudi Arabia. Whether it's true or not, it does, possibly answer the question as to why he left quickly, but I'm not saying that is the reason. That was a comical take. Could it be true? It could be true. Again, Egypt was, the Rose Al Yusuf paper was telling America they had copies of President Obama's membership papers for the Muslim Brotherhood. It does make you think. Was he Muslim Brotherhood? He did things to let people know he was in it. Yes, he did use, I believe there was a time he used the For Rabia sign. So there are things to think about. Did Barack Obama bring the Muslim Brotherhood into the White House? Absolutely. Has Biden, the Obama 2.0 person, brought the Muslim Brotherhood in? Yes, I've been talking about that. I talked about it last week. And again, this is the only president in the United States to have ever called for jihad while he was running for office. Believe it or not, it's shockingly true. Okay, I have a lot of topics to cover, and I'm going to keep coming back and talking about some of these horrible things that have to do with Islam. And unfortunately, there is a lot of other news this week that really needs to be discussed. One of those things, I'm going to play a videotape in a few minutes by Sean Hannity. And I want to give some background to this. Sean Hannity is interviewing James O'Keefe about the FBI raid. Now, I have been following this story since I first heard about it, and there are some things to be drastically concerned about. When the federal government decides that they have a right to confiscate things that belong to a reporter on their stories that have nothing to do with protecting the public, we have a problem. See, this is all supposedly involving a quote, this is a quote, stolen diary of his daughter, of Joe Biden's daughter. Again, the funny thing is about this, the true story about this is that Project Veritas a year ago had handed that diary to law enforcement. Okay. How they got it and information regarding it, that doesn't need to be shared, and it has not been shared with anybody. But the question is, why did they raid their homes after Project Veritas obtained this and felt it wasn't able to be verified, so they handed over to law enforcement? So what did Project Veritas do that was unethical? Nothing. See, Project Veritas, this is the part that gets me the most. They were being good, ethical journalists. James O'Keefe was leading the charge on doing what is good and right. I'm not saying he's a Christian, but I am saying he was leading the charge in doing what is good and right in ethical journalism. We are not seeing that in the Washington Post. We are not seeing that in the New York Times. We are not seeing that in most newspapers today. We are not seeing that in most broadcasts today, like CNN, the well-known creator of Creative News Network, Communist News Network, Clinton News Network, however you want to call it. They are well known for manufacturing truth. And just as I was just saying a few minutes ago, we can't trust them. Have we been able to trust Project Veritas? Yes. Have they ever shown us something untruthful? No. Has James corrected himself at some point when he found something wrong? Absolutely. And, he came out and there was something, I cannot remember what it was. It was just I think it was a misstatement or something. That was ways back. But again, it wasn't, the thing is, they haven't given us anything fake or anything false. What they have constantly done is verify before it makes it onto the screen. So when I play this, I want you to think about your being involved in politics or whatever and covering it as a reporter. Now, I've actually had one time, people will come and say to me, aren't you scared, because you talk about the dangers of Islam. Aren't you scared about what's happening? I mean, aren't you scared someone's going to come after you? I says, well, this is the truth. I've only had one time ever I was scared. I had written a story about FEMA financing groups that support terrorism here in the United States. And I had proof of it, thanks to FOIAs. See, CARE was advertising to people about a grant given by FEMA and to organizations such as sub-organizations such as CARE, the state organizations or whatever in their states. And one of those in Florida had asked for money. Part of the requirement was they had to submit a police report. And the police report should testify as to their having had terrorist threats, or they can have an insurance company send a statement. Well, I received the police statement. The police statement said, "We've received no calls from this address." There was no mentioning of hardening of targets or anything. No worries. It was just no. I want you to think about that. There was nothing to worry about at that address. They'd never had a phone call. No one had said anything. So they got thousands of dollars to harden the target. I want you to think about that. Harden. Who are they hardening the target against? Because it's definitely not terrorists, but that was the money was for. The money from FEMA was to defend those organizations that have been threatened by terrorists. Well, the truth was, after that article came out, I went fishing. And I walked there. And as I was preparing to go, there were two black Suburbans behind me. See, they weren't expecting me to walk. As I got up to go, one of them started to follow me. And I sat there and looked at it and watched it, and it went on. And the second one started up. It just stood there, and I looked at it until it passed. Now, have I ever been scared like that before or since? No. It did make me think, and it wasn't long after that article came out. It did make national headlines. Not through the internet, it did. But yeah, it should make people think when a federal organization is helping terrorist organizations. Yeah. And I have lots of questions as to how that money went out. But again, this is the reason why I'm playing this next piece. When you're doing what's right in journalism, Democrats will come after you. Why? Because they don't like what's nasty or they don't like to have truth be known, because it definitely exposes them. So this is the reason why I'm playing this tape here. It's a little bit longer than I wanted to play, but again, I think this is actually important. When you think about your First Amendment rights, what does that mean to you? That's what it comes down to. What do your First Amendment rights mean to you? How important is it to understand your rights? Now, I think about the freedom of the press as one of those things that absolutely, absolutely, absolutely must be protected. What am I talking about? I'm talking about protecting your right to have truth given to you. That's the scary truth. Here we go.
And tonight, a major developing story after the FBI raided the home of Project Veritas CEO and founder James O'Keefe, along with other Project Veritas journalists, as part of an investigation into a diary believed to have been written by Joe Biden's daughter, Ashley. Now, according to O'Keefe, within an hour of the first raid last week, the New York Times reached out for comment. Now, how did the Times know about the search warrant so quickly? I don't know. It's just one of many unanswered questions. Kind of sounds like that pre-dawn raid on Roger Stone. Fake news CNN cameras just happened to be there at 5 o'clock in the morning. Anyway, here to explain more, his first interview. He is the CEO and founder of Project Veritas, James O'Keefe, along with his attorney, Paul Cali is with us. Welcome, both of you. James, I think it's important to establish other media, and I'm not comparing you to other media, but other media use undercover cameras and have for many, many years, like even 60 Minutes and NBC's To Catch a Predator, right? That this is not a new form of journalism. You acknowledge that?
Well, Sean, on Saturday morning, I acknowledge that, but I woke up to a pre-dawn raid banging on my door. I went to the door to answer the door, and there were 10 FBI agents with a battering ram, white blinding lights. They turned me around, handcuffed me, and threw me against the hallway. I was partially clothed in front of my neighbors. They confiscated my phone. They raided my apartment. On my phone were many of my reporters' notes, a lot of my sources unrelated to this story, and a lot of confidential donor information to our news organization, Sean. So I've heard the phrase, the process is the punishment. I didn't really understand what that meant until this weekend. And Sean, I wouldn't wish this on any journalist.
Let me go into the issue. Like anybody that works in any form of journalism or in the press in any capacity, whether you're a talk show host like me or doing what you do or doing what anybody else does, in the course of doing your work, you have sources, correct? You have whistleblowers. You have people giving you tips all the time. To what extent can you tell us the context under which you were given this diary? I assume you did not take the diary yourself, did you not? Is that correct?
That's correct. I'll speak to that, Sean, if I can. An anonymous source contacted Project Veritas and indicated the source had in its lawful possession a copy of the diary that the source said belonged to Ashley Biden. Project Veritas had no prior contact with the source. The source had a lawyer. The lawyer engaged in negotiations with Veritas's in-house counsel. In the resulting written agreement, like so many news organizations do, Veritas, the source again affirmed that it had lawful possession of the source material. In exchange for that, Veritas agreed to pay money for the right to publish the material. As you know, Sean, Veritas never did. It killed the story on the newsroom floor. It went a step further, and it turned the material into local law enforcement. The actions of President Biden's Department of Justice in this case are unprecedented because there's decades of Supreme Court precedent.
James, I've known you for a long time. You had no direct knowledge that what this source was giving you could in any way have been stolen. You were not able to corroborate the authenticity of the diary, and you never ran it. At what point then did you go to law enforcement on your own unsolicited and tell them that you had this in your possession and it might be somebody else's?
Well, Sean, I mean, we get sources come to us all the time. We have thousands of sources come to Project Veritas. The routine nature of journalism to be shown information from a variety of sources. But this is an attack on the First Amendment by the Department of Justice. We didn't publish the story. We couldn't authenticate the story, so our journalists looked into it. We did not publish the story because we could not authenticate it.
Which, by the way, if you can't authenticate it, then you did the right thing. At what point did you feel a need to bring this to law enforcement? At what point in the process did that happen?
After the decision was made to kill the story and not run it. I got to add one thing if I could, Sean. You use the S word. It's really important to understand not to buy the premise that the diary's stolen. Nobody.
Well, that was my next
knows
question.
If that's the case,
I have been reading all over the internet, everywhere in between, that she claims it was stolen, but other people claim it might have been left in a former place of residence of hers. Do we have an answer to that question?
We do, but you know, I think people might look at me and say that I'm crazy for talking about the facts at the level I have already, and so I'm going to respectfully say that's going to come out. It's going to be awfully favorable to James and awfully favorable to his news organization.
Well, I think it's awfully interesting that
limit...
James is the one that brought it to law enforcement's attention. Let me ask this question. What is the alleged crime that they have here?
I don't know. This was
They didn't tell you?
Turned in a year ago. Well, the search warrant has misprison of a felony, accessory after the fact, and transporting material across state lines as the basis for raiding the home of a journalist and seizing his work papers and journalist notes.
I would assume both of you are pretty familiar with Daniel Ellsberg and the Pentagon Papers case and the New York Times obtaining stolen top secret documents that they were publishing. They actually set a precedent in the U.S. Supreme Court in a 6-3 decision that said they had the right to publish it, even though that was stolen material. Do you see?
It's entirely similar. There's no exception to Mr. O'Keefe and Project Veritas. The right to take the material knowing it was stolen, the right to seek comment, the right to investigate, and ultimately the right to publish. This is outrageous and unprecedented. And journalists everywhere on either side.
Why, if you went to authorities a year ago, if I'm understanding you correctly, why did this come up now? James?
Listen, James, go ahead. I'm sorry, Sean.
I don't know the answer to that, Sean, but this is, they've crossed the bridge here. If they can do this to me, these are about certain principles that are so fundamental, our First Amendment in this country. I'm calling upon all journalists to take a stand against this. A source comes to us with information. I don't even decide to publish it. If they can do this to me, if they can do this to this journalist and raid my home and take my reporter notes, they'll do it to any journalist. This is about something very fundamental in this country. I don't know what direction this country is going in, but journalists everywhere have to rise up, because we broke no laws here. They could do it to me, they'll do it to anybody.
So when they came to your house in this pre-dawn raid and they threw handcuffs on you and pulled you out of your house and 10 agents go inside, I assume they took items out of your house and office, as I understand it. At that point, did they just take the handcuffs off and say, see you later?
They spent about over 2 hours in my apartment, and they confiscated 2 of my iPhones. And again, these phones contained a lot of source information and reporter notes on them. These are serious First Amendment issues and donor information to our news foundation. So yeah, it's troubling. I asked to speak with my attorney a few times. They allowed me to do that, but I was kind of in a state of shock, frankly. I can't believe this is happening.
Well, let me go back. I'm trying to understand this. So a year prior, you go to law enforcement on your own. That you have a source, gives you information, you don't know where it came from, you try to corroborate it, you're unable to do so, issues arise as to where this might have come from. You, on your own a year prior, go to law enforcement. Did you hand over to them at the time this diary? And did you have any indication where the diary came from? James?
Came from the source, Sean, as I said.
The source gave us the information, and we didn't know if it was stolen or not. We don't know that.
I would assume
but
that
journalists throughout the 20th century have been given information. You know, the Washington Post and the New York Times are given information inside all manner of institutions, and they're protected by the Supreme Court of the United States to publish that information that a source gives to them. So there's no distinction between...
Did they ask you for the name of the source? Are you going to protect that source?
Well, insofar as they have my reporter's notes on the phone they confiscated from the pre-dawn raid, they have access to the contents of my iPhone, which is deeply troubling and should outrage the ACLU and any other journalist in the United States. They have access to
James. They don't
all
care.
of the contents from my phone.
Believe me,
Look,
if
I
it's
sent
not...
him a letter.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Paul.
Sorry. I sent him a
I'll give
letter.
you the last word.
I sent him a letter. I let him know that I represent James, and in the normal course, the material on the phone that they're entitled to have would have been produced promptly. It's the other material on there that is deeply troubling. This is the First Amendment. It's an assault.
Would this, on a scale of 1 to 10, how damaging, if this turned out to be true, you haven't been able to authenticate it, if it turned out to be true, how damaging would this be to the president and his family? James?
Look, you know the answer to that?
Well, I mean, I think I couldn't authenticate the source material. I had a newsroom at the time. We were looking through it for a little while. We couldn't authenticate it, so I decided not to run it. And I'm trying to figure out what more we could have done as journalists. What more could I have done but not run the story?
What more could Project Veritas have done than not run this story? What more could they have done than turn over the diary that they're all looking for and supposedly investigating for? What more could they have done? What have they done that is illegal? Again, they got the government going after them for being good, responsible journalists. That's what happened today. When I did my piece in 2015, I did not realize it was that long ago. In 2015, on FEMA funding ineligible groups, I got black Suburbans following me for reporting the truth, getting the information legally through filing a FOIA, a Freedom of Information Act request. I got the information legally. Why are they following me? Because I reported the truth. Because Democrats, for some reason, when they're in federal office, at the very least, can't handle other people hearing the truth. Well, is this just Democrats? No. And that's the truth. I'm picking on Democrats because those are the ones that I have seen this with the most. I'm scared when I think of our country's government being used as a tyranny. And that is the truth about how things currently are. It's the way things currently are, and it is a shame, and it is an embarrassment. Can we change this? Unfortunately, we are the peons right now. Can we change this? I have a fantasy, and that's what this is, a fantasy where former generals will be working behind the scenes, pulling strings, and coordinating certain actions that will lead to the arrest of certain individuals. That's my fantasy. I have a date that I believe that this could be done by. But other than that, it is a fantasy at this point. I don't know why I have that particular date in mind, so I'm not mentioning it. So as time comes on, we will see. Or it just may end up being my first fiction. We will see. If you've also been watching the news, you'll hear this that the Kyle Rittenhouse trial is underway. The prosecution rested today. Yesterday they embarrassed themselves by doing a couple things that the judge admonished the prosecutor for violating the law not once, but multiple times. When the prosecutor is being yelled at by the judge for violating the law, you have to sit there. This guy's a lawyer. Do you think he doesn't know what he's doing? He's pandering to his crowd. That's the scary truth about what's happening. We have, so here's the thing I just couldn't help myself but had to laugh about. They put this man on as up in a witness seat, and he's the one who basically was one of the last ones shot, and he survived the shooting. What happened? So they put him on trial. He had told this story, he had told that story, but while under oath, in front of all the witnesses, in front of the jury, he said, he didn't shoot me until I pulled my gun. He didn't say it in those exact words, but he said he didn't get shot, that Kyle didn't pull the trigger until he pulled the gun on Kyle. Oh, that makes it self-defense. And that's some of the craziness and the truth of stuff that's being revealed in this. One of the persons that was killed was a pedophile. If you're listening to some of the insane, wildly liberal, quote, news organizations, well, they're not news if they're fake, but you'll find organizations out there that are just lying through their teeth about what's going on. My suggestion, another organization, if you can, again, I would throw money at, if you can, throw money at Project Veritas. If you can, throw money at Media Research Center, MRC. You can MRC TV or mrc.org. I love that organization. Why? Because they look not just at conservative or Republican or whatever. They don't just look at liberals either. They're looking at everything. And they actually measure things like how many minutes is spent on this versus something else. All right. That's actually important in the scheme of things. You can measure influence that way. I love it. And they have a compilation of of people like Joy Reid commenting on Rittenhouse trials. And there's just sitting, you just sit there and listen to this. It should disgust any American citizen about the racist, anti-liberty things that are said. Again, this is stuff you would never, ever expect to be heard and said in the United States. I mean, never against somebody who's, again, we used to believe, at least Americans have been taught. I taught my students since I started, for all the 20 years that I taught, that you are considered innocent until proven guilty. But under these Democratic liberals who are out there with a show, they are out there pronouncing someone's guilt. They're not allowing the trial to proceed. They believe their influence and their statements are more important. I have problems with that. Again, it is anti-American. Why do I say that? Because our Constitution tells us that you're innocent until proven guilty. And when you start changing those things, you're spitting on our Constitution. And I have serious issues with a news station, quote, again, news station. I don't consider CNN news, again, they are anything. And when you put that amount of fake stuff out that they do, I don't know how they can call themselves news. There should be something about that. And propaganda station maybe, but not news. What does it mean when nothing is being done to stop this too? That's another thing. But that's one of our freedoms. You're allowed to lie. We don't put you in jail for lying unless it hurts somebody. Something to think about. So, on the topic of lying and the topic of deceit, I'm going to mention a name that I don't like to mention. A man that my father, because of him, my father started to vote Republican. Who am I talking about? I'm talking about John Kerry. John Kerry says there's no bar low enough that he can't slide underneath it. If it's lower than the dirt, he'll become a worm and slide underneath. Why am I saying that? This week, he was in Congress. He was lobbying Congress to not pass a bill that would deny China's ability to sell any products made by slave labor of Muslims from China. Again, who are we talking about? The slave labor. Get this. Washington Free Beacon caught this story, and it's by Adam Credo, and I love Adam Credo's work. So if you can go to Washington Free Beacon, send him some kudos because this his work is outstanding. He writes this. Climate czar John Kerry is lobbying House lawmakers to oppose legislation that would ban the import of all Chinese-made goods that are produced using Uyghur slave labor. Okay, these are Muslims. So John Kerry's okay with using slave labor in China. And he wants to make sure we buy Chinese products that are made with slave labor. Who do you think John Kerry's getting a payment from? I mean, does that man have any bar lower? Yeah. So let me keep going. This article says, the Biden administration's internal strife over China points to a tug of war between the White House, which supports this type of measure, and the State Department, which is pushing a softer China policy in the hopes of securing a climate deal with Beijing. An effort that Kerry's spearheading. Wait a minute. If Kerry's spearheading this, why is he having a problem? Oh, because, again, who's paying those bills for Kerry and Biden, who's been doing that for a while? Could that be China? So now he's trying to make it look okay. It's hard. You see this stuff, you got to sit there and laugh. All right. So if Kerry's working with the State Department, he's working with trying to get them not to pass a bill that denies China from making a profit off of slave labor of Muslims. We've got a problem. Again, you got to sit there. Is there anything lower? Again, there's no bar lower. John Kerry has no problem with deceiving the American public. We've seen that for years. I give him thanks for making my father vote Republican. But again, we see this stuff in the United States. It's disgusting that a man who could say yes and no and flip and flop so often could still hold any kind of influence in the United States. But for some reason, if you have a D behind your name, you get a pass. And that, again, unbelievable. I mean, to see that those people with that kind of a belief structure, you just got to sit there and laugh. All right, next up, I have an article which kind of sat there and I saw this and I smirked. I just started laughing because there's all these articles out there now that's saying, oh, well, you got to be careful of COVID. Well, you got to do this. Well, you got to protect yourself from, you got to wear a mask. You got to do this. You got to do that. But when you start doing the research, it's it should shock you when you start doing the research yourself. Okay, how many kids are actually getting COVID and are actually dying of COVID? To record, I believe there may be in this whole country, there may be a total of 4 dead. Okay, they had other things happening. Now, this is what we call comorbidity. The comorbidity may be more of the reason than COVID. And that's the truth behind the number 4 that I have heard for behind each of those cases. Now, are kids getting COVID? It's hard to tell because the test for COVID is the same as the test for the flu. So are kids getting the flu? Well, kids always get the flu. But if you're testing using the same test for COVID that you use for the flu, you've got to sit there and wonder. I mean, what's the real truth here? Well, unless the kids have lost a sense of taste, Now we do know one of the first things that let me know that this COVID-19 was man-made was that it wasn't touching kids. Not early on and pretty much still not that way. So why are they pushing kids to get a vaccine? I have serious questions about that. When you consider some of the things that are happening to pregnant women who get this jab, it's the reason why there's studies saying that they should not get the jab. It's the reason why they're saying women who are breastfeeding should not get the jab. Again, what we're talking about, this jab is being called a vaccine. It was called gene therapy by Pfizer and Moderna until August this past summer, when they wiped their sites and now refer to it as a vaccine. Until then, they called it gene therapy. So why am I talking about this? Well, school districts across the United States are taking sides. Will they follow with mandates and force the children to get a vaccine and staff to get a vaccine? Well, in California, Governor Newsom has issued an edict that California school district teachers must get a vaccine and children must get one. One school district has said, basically, forget you, we ain't doing it. And I sit there and I read this article. It's by Pilar Aris in Fox News. It's titled, California School District Will Not Comply with Newsom's COVID-19 Vaccine Mandate, Prepared to Accept Costs. Now, I want you to think about the wisdom of this. See, if one child dies, or one child gets sick, or one child gets a severe reaction as a result of the vaccine mandate, that school district could go broke. Why? Because they mandated, they required it. They could be named in a lawsuit. It's one thing for your state to be named. Your local schools, can they afford to lose a lawsuit like that? Because let me tell you, if my kid got a vaccine jab, or they're calling it a vaccine, this gene therapy jab, and something happened, I would be livid. I would be after them. So what district am I talking about? It is the Calaveras Unified School District, where the trustees voted 5-0 and decided to not enforce, or comply with the mandate. So they're not forcing their kids. They're discussing whether they're going to have masks. They're not having this. I think there's great wisdom in refusing this. This is something to think about. There are enough reasons for these to be refused. There's enough reasons for masks to be lied about. When the CDC says masks are only 2% effective, and you have governments that mandate them, why are they doing it? It's to show that they have power and for no other reason. And I'm going to say, if you want to see some interesting stuff this week, Dr. Peter McCullough he got together with some other gentlemen and did a report. It was basic gathering of scientists and medical professionals, and they took a stand this past Friday. I was trying to find the video, and I can find it in one area, but I can't transfer it to my computer, which is frustrating to no end to me. But I've got to learn how to transfer things from my phone with video, or how to take video on of stuff that I'm watching on my phone, because I can't figure that out yet. But again, I get sent all sorts of stuff. Some of these things you just sit there and go, why? And out there also, you're going to hear this week is an insanity about supply chain issues in California. Now, I'm actually looking for an expert. If anybody knows of an expert on supply chain issues, please send them my way. I am looking for someone who dares to tell the truth about this supply chain issue. I have talked some with farmers. I have talked some with a few truckers here and there, but I do not have a reach with somebody who can actually address this as a whole, because it's quite a complex issue. And I want somebody who's actually knowledgeable. So if you know of anybody out there that could tell the truth on this, great. I'm going to be going into that next week. This week, the big thing out there about the California ports that you're going to find out is that there's 111 ships they're talking about stranded outside California ports. The funny thing about them being stranded is they're being offered a place to go, which is Florida, if they just want to go there and unload rather than sitting out in the water. I don't know. I mean, it's something they're saying is something they've never had before. The question is, how long would it take them to get to Florida? They'd have to go through Panama. I don't know. Is it worth the wait? They'll have to wait and find out. I see a Muhammad has joined. He may find some of this next stuff interesting. I'm going to be talking about what's been happening around the world. And some of these things, just you sit there and you hear them. Like, how about this one? In Germany, I don't know if you've heard this one. Germany, there was an attack on public transportation. Let's talk about that one. And pull this up just a second. This comes from the BBC. 3 were seriously injured in a knife attack on a train in Germany. The police arrested the alleged attacker, a 27-year-old Syrian man, shortly after the attack on a train traveling between the cities of Regensburg and Nuremberg in Bavaria. The motive for the attack at around 9 o'clock, again, this is 9 o'clock, I'm guessing that means in the morning, remains unclear, they're saying. Okay. Remember, they're saying it remains unclear. All right. One woman told the German newspaper Bild she was standing in the aisle when she heard another passenger screaming, "There's a knife. Everyone get to the rear." The train was halted at the station. According to a German media report, the arrested man had been granted refugee status after entering Germany in 2014 and was suffering from psychological problems. Yes, this is another psychological problem related to something called jihad. Yes, if you are having a psychological problem, the Europeans will call it, if you're having a desire for jihad, the Europeans will call it a psychological problem. If you're grabbing a knife and stabbing people, and it's interesting. This man claims to be, again, 27 years old. He's, again, saying he's from Syria. The question is, can he prove he's from Syria? Probably not. Most of those who came from Syria in the time frame designated, Syria does not have and still does not have a place for documents to be verified. This is the number one reason why, back in 2016, 2017, somewhere back there, I asked people, it's going to be 2015. Wow. I stood with the people of South Carolina to stop Syrians from coming into South Carolina. If you can't verify something, you can't trust it, you don't accept it. That's what Project Veritas did. Unfortunately, Nikki Haley didn't want to listen to that. So again, that was why that particular case going. But again, we have the public newspapers hiding the facts. Now, again, they're saying he received refugee status. Again, they didn't mention that he had a love of Islam, and Islam allows for attacking non-Muslims, but they're not mentioning those things. There's a knife. Can you imagine how often that happens now? Since hundreds of thousands of Muslims have entered their country. Hundreds of thousands. I wish it was different. I wish the truth was different. And next up, I have a story from Austria, which I feel like we absolutely must talk about. A Muslim migrant father, officially 21, attacks his son, 10, and 2 bystanders with a knife. That's the story there. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah. See, they didn't tell you the whole story. I just read you a story by the BBC. So let's get the truth out. The Syrian, he attacks son, injures 2 helpers with a knife. All right. So these are refugees who cheat on their age. That's the truth. Express covered it. Express tends to be a little bit more honest. This is Express out of Austria. Let me just pull this up and try to get the translation. Joy. All right. A bloody argument broke out between a father and son. A Syrian attacked his son. 2 acquaintances, 15 and 29, wanted to settle a dispute and were attacked and injured by the man with a knife. If you read the you were probably just amazed at the age information as we were. To be on the safe side, the Express editorial team asked Vienna whether it might be a typo or whether the Syrian was actually able to experience fatherhood at the age of 11. They are refugees who cheated their age, according to information. So, again, when they came to Austria, they told people they were those ages. So is that man really 21 and have a child that's 10? Probably not. Has he been pretending to be a teenager? Absolutely. And did he receive benefits? Absolutely. Did he attack someone and should he be removed from the country? Again, absolutely. What will they do? Well, they'll say he's having a psychological episode of, and this is the sad, sorry truth. It's a game. They have to hide the truth because knowing the truth is too dangerous for some. How about this one? In Cyprus, 6 Muslims, including at least 4 migrants, plotted jihad murders of 5 Israelis. This comes from Jihad Watch by Robert Spencer. He writes, the Jews in the Quran are called the strongest of all people in enmity toward the Muslims. Surah 582. They fabricate things and falsely ascribe them to Allah. Surah 279, 375, 181. They claim that Allah's power is limited. 564. They love to listen to lies. 541. They disobey Allah and never observe his commands. 513. They're disputing and quarreling. 247. Hiding the truth and misleading people. Staging rebellion against the prophets and rejecting their guidance. 255. Being hypocritical. 214 and 244. This goes on and on. They are under Allah's curse. 930. And Muslims should wage war against them and subjugate them under Islamic hegemony. 929. Cyprus charges 6 with terror for alleged plot to kill 5 Israelis. Cypriot authorities filed charges Friday against 6 suspects for allegedly planning to attack Israeli targets on the eastern Mediterranean island. Among those charged with the main suspect, Orkan Azadov, a 38-year-old Azerbaijani national. He and 3 Pakistanis indicted in the case are accused of plotting to visit Cyprus to commit acts of terror. What do they all have in common? Islam, Is that a surprise? Nope. 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 How about this one? Norway. Muslim migrant screaming Allah Akbar, Allahu Akbar, and quoting Quran attacks people with knife, and they say the motive's unclear. Yeah. And wait a minute. Is the motive unclear? Wait a minute. What was he saying? Allahu Akbar. How is the motive unclear? How about that? I mean, that's the stuff that just makes me laugh. How is it even close to unclear? Okay, if he quotes the Quran during the attack and he says Allahu Akbar, he's committing an act of what is it, people? It's definitely jihad. How can the police, how can the media lie so much and expect people to believe it? I mean, can't they see this is the reason why no one trusts them anymore? This is the reason why people like me come out and have now created a news show to share some of these horrible things. Again, if you can support Jihad Watch or throw money at David Horowitz Freedom Center, please do. They are organizations that could definitely use your financing. Please do support them. I keep talking about this stuff, about this jihad that's going on. And I think for the end today, I'm just going to read a piece, my last chapter in my book. I talked about hatred last week, and I will not publish this one online, this chapter either online, but most of the chapters are published online. If you go to paulsutliff.blogspot.com, or you can go to paulsutliff.com, and you can find a lot of this. But I have to say, I wrote this piece. I think I can finish it within the half hour. Is there an Islamic social norm that promotes war, jihad against non-Muslims? So I'm going to tell people, if you want to get this book, it is called The Cancer of Civilization Jihad. Go to Amazon.com, pick it up. It's an excellent book. Here I'm bragging about my own work. I'm sorry. But it's one way to support me. Go there and take a look at this work. And then my recommendation is, if you like it, pick up on any of the other books that I put out. Please do. I get concerned when I see lies. I get concerned when I hear lies. So I put this book together to fight misinformation. So let me just read this chapter. Whenever the topic of jihad, an Islamic war against all non-Muslims, comes up, people come out of the woodwork to defend Islam. Nothing you can say or do will change in their minds. Worse is that even if you show them evidence from Islamic scripture, they flat out deny that jihad is an Islamic social norm, or worse, an actual essential doctrine of Islam. Examples of people coming out of the woodwork to defend Islam after an act of terrorism are numerous. Some of the defense of Islam comes from our own politicians, like President George W. Bush. On September 20th, 2001, he said, "The terrorists are traitors to their own faith, trying in effect to hijack Islam itself. The enemy of America is not our many Muslim friends. It is not our many Arab friends. Our enemy is a radical network of terrorists and every government that supports them." Now, he said that in joint sessions of Congress to the American people, the United States Capitol, September 20th, 2001. It was an address to the entire country. This statement alone by President George W. Bush created policy that constrained the intelligence community in the United States from truly learning Al-Qaeda's threat doctrine. Threat doctrine is essential knowledge for any military professional. Military officials must know their enemy in order to win any battle. In the words of Sun Tzu, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the results of 100 battles. If you know yourself, but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. Stephen Coughlin's work, To Our Great Detriment, Ignoring What Extremists Say About Jihad, was published in May of 2007, revealed that President Bush's words on September 20th of 2001 essentially forbid a study by members of the intelligence community into the Islamic doctrine of jihad. by proclaiming that Islam was hijacked and that the enemy was not Islam. It didn't matter whether this was true or not. After that speech, it became off limits to truly discover what jihad is. If it was the threat doctrine of al-Qaeda and how far removed it was or was not from the mainstream Islam. A few years later, other politicians committed the same mistake. In the words of Stephen Coughlin, it was indeed to our great detriment. Hillary Clinton said in 2015, after the attack in Paris and before San Bernardino, let's be clear, Islam is not our adversary. Muslims are peaceful and tolerant people and have nothing whatsoever to do with terrorism. Really, Hillary? Love to see you prove that from the Quran. Well, even though Coughlin saw the answer, we still need to ask the question once again. Were the politicians right? Is Islam not an enemy? To those, I add my questions. Number one, what if there is a social norm that promotes jihad, holy war against non-Muslims? Question two, what if Islamic scriptures proclaim jihad against non-Muslims as an active war that will not end until the whole world is Muslim? Question three, what if these are true? The responsible thing would be to look and see what Islamic scriptures, scholars, and Sharia states about jihad. Then if Islam indeed does teach jihad as a holy war against non-Muslims, there are two very important questions that need to be considered. One, is this taught in your local mosques? That would make it personal to you, right? Is this taught in your local madrasa, your local Islamic school? What is in the Islamic scriptures in respect to jihad? Better yet, where should one begin to look for the definition of the concept of jihad? The answer is in their law, Sharia. Sunni Islam has 4 schools of thought in Sharia. The International Institute of Islamic Thought gave their stamp of approval for the English translation of Umda al-Salik. In English, the book is called Umda al-Salik, aka Reliance of the Traveler. It is extensive and covers everything from daily life to rules about war and more. Sharia definition of jihad follows. This is from 09.0 jihad. Jihad means to war against the non-Muslims and is etymologically derived from the word mujahada, signifying warfare to establish the religion. And it is the lesser religion. As for the greater jihad, it is spiritual warfare against the lower selves, which is why the prophet said as he was returning from jihad, quote, we have returned from the lesser jihad to the greater jihad. Now, pay close attention. You heard that, right? The scriptural basis for jihad, prior to scholarly consensus, is such Quranic verses as, now this is still part of Sharia that I'm reading. Listen closely. Fighting is prescribed for you. Quran 2:216. Slay them wherever you find them. Quran 4:89. Fight the idolaters utterly. Quran 9:36. In such hadiths as the one related by Bukhari and Muslim that the Prophet said, quote, I have been commanded to fight people until they testify that there is no God but Allah and that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah, and perform the prayer and pay zakat. If they say it, and they have saved their blood and possessions from me, except for the right of Allah of Islam over them, and their final reckoning is without. Again, I'm still reading Sharia. And the hadith reported by Muslim, to go forth in the morning or evening to fight in the path of Allah is better than the whole world and everything in it. Now, that was Sharia. Wait, this can't be true, can it? That's what I first thought the moment I read it for myself. Maybe, just maybe, it's not for all the believers of Islam, right? Maybe. Everything I had learned about Islam was upside down. Had I been lied to? You know, I was a school teacher. I was taught things like, oh yeah, Islam is okay. It's what you just heard. Does that make you think? This is Sharia. So had I been lied to, Was I misinformed? How was it possible that just because I read a book for Muslims, I was learning that jihad is not just something for extremists? Are you catching that? Stop. Extremists are people outside the norm. Jihad is being said here to be the norm. So even using the term extremist is misinformation. Maybe the hadith cited in Sharia that states we have returned from the lesser jihad to the greater jihad provides an out. When you do a bit of research on this hadith, you learn that it is classified as da'if, which means weak. Credit should go to Stephen Coughlin for being one of the first to reveal that this concept came from a hadith that is labeled weak. It's weak. Further research on this reveals that some very interesting elements about this hadith. Wiki Islam has an entry labeled lesser versus greater jihad. It cites several Islamic scholars on the topic. The article states that it is claimed that the inner jihad essentially refers to all the struggles that a Muslim may go through in adhering to the religion. For example, a scholarly study of Islam can be intellectual struggle that some allegedly may refer to as jihad. This goes on. During the Prophet Muhammad's lifetime, onward to the present, the word jihad was and is almost always used in a military sense. The idea of a greater and lesser jihad was a later development. A what? A later development, which originated from the 11th century. So it's made up. Are you catching that? It's made up. I'll have to think about that. XYZ, I'll have to think about it. All right. Let's keep going. The history of this is from it came from an 11th century book, The History of Baghdad, by the Islamic scholar Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi, by the way of Yahya ibn al-Ala, who said, we were told by Layth, on the authority of Atta, on the authority of Abu Rabah, on the authority of Jabir, who said the Prophet returned from one of his battles, and thereupon told us, you have arrived with an excellent arrival. You have come from the lesser jihad to the greater jihad, the striving of a servant of Allah against his desires. All four schools of Sunni jurisprudence, as well as the Shiite tradition, are formulated in the 2nd and 3rd centuries after Muhammad's death, make no reference at all to the greater jihad, only the lesser. Are you catching this? Keep thinking. The conclusion drawn by Wiki Islam is that this hadith is manufactured. It is made up, a conjecture of someone's imagination who knew next to nothing about Islam, Muhammad, or jihad. The conclusion means that the ads that appear on buses and other means of mass transportation for my jihad was nothing more than misinformation campaign for the gullible and foolish non-Muslims to swallow. You'll see things like, my jihad means to stay fit despite my busy schedule. Another one says, my jihad is to build friendships across the aisle. So again, this was all misinformation. But there is more in Sharia on jihad. The law book of Sharia, Umda al-Salik, again, Reliance of the Traveler, talks about obligation character of jihad. Obligatory character of jihad. 09.1. Jihad is a communal obligation. When enough people perform it to successfully accomplish it, it is no longer obligatory upon others. The evidence for which is the Prophet saying, he who provides the equipment for a soldier in jihad has performed jihad. The lights came on the moment I read this. I now understood why we find so many Muslims involved in raising money for what we call terrorism. But is terrorism the right word? After all, isn't what they do murder? Is the label terrorism a crime less severe than murder? Believe it or not, in most countries, murder is a capital offense when it is intentional, resulting in either a death penalty or life imprisonment. But terrorism, you get 20 years. A penalty, that's it. And you get out early for good behavior. Think about it. If hatred against all that is not Islamic is a social norm, which I read last week, then how does jihad not fit in as part of their social norms? Hatred against even their own children is approved of if they're not Islamic enough. So, what would make us think that they would not have a social norm to wage war against all who are not Islamic? Remember the topic of abrogation discussed that I would have discussed earlier in this book. If you get this book, definitely going to learn about abrogation. Abrogation is used to nullify passages where there is a disagreement between verses. These verses came earlier in the Quran before Muhammad had political strength. Jasser Audas Bile states that he is the Al-Shatibi Chair of Masjid Studies at the International Peace College of South Africa. It states he's a visiting professor for the study of Islam at Carleton University in Canada. He's the founding director of the Masjid Center in the Philosophy of Islamic Law in London, and a professor at the University of Waterloo, Alexandria University, Islamic University of Novi Pazar, Qatar Faculty of Islamic Studies, and the American University of Sharia in the UAE. Dr. Auda is the author of Maqasid al-Sharia, a beginner's guide. Note that he teaches at the International Peace College in South Africa. Yet in this book, he states that the verse of the sword, Surah 9:5, contradicts more than 200 other verses in the Quran, peaceful verses. But because of the law of abrogation, most exegetes conclude that this verse, which revealed towards the end of the prophet's life, abrogated each and every contradicting verse that was revealed before it. This reveals the importance of lying and deceit in Islam, also mentioned when I go back. I'm talking about chapter 4 in this book. After thinking about this and reviewing Sharia, I went back to see what one of the most respected Islamic scholars, Ibn Kathir, wrote on the alleged verse of the sword, Surah 9:5. This is what he wrote. Mujahid, Amr bin Shayub, Muhammad bin Ashaq, Qatada, As-Sudi, and Abdur Rahman bin Zayd bin Aslam said that the 4 months mentioned in this ayah are the 4 months grace period mentioned in the earlier ayah. So travel freely for 4 months throughout the land. Allah said next, so when the sacred months have passed, meaning upon the end of the 4 months during which we prohibited them from fighting the idolaters, which is the grace period, we gave them the fight and kill the idolaters wherever you may find them. Allah's statement next. Then fight the mushrikin wherever you find them, means on the earth in general, except for the sacred area, for Allah said, and fight not with them at al-Masjid al-Haram, unless they fight you there. But if they attack you, then fight them. Allah said there, and capture them, executing some and keeping some as prisoners. And besiege them and lie in wait for them in each and every ambush. Do not wait until you find them. Rather, seek and besiege them in their areas and forts. Gather intelligence about them in the various roads and fairways. What is made wide looks over smaller to them. This way they will have no choice but to die or embrace Islam. But if they repent and perform the salah and give the zakat and then leave their way free, verily Allah is oft forgiving, most merciful. Forgiving? Forgiving. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq used this and other honorable ayat as proof for fighting those who refrain from paying zakat. These ayat allow fighting people unless and until they embrace Islam and implement its rulings and obligations. Again, this comes, what I'm reading to you and continue to read to you, comes from the scholar Ibn Kathir. He continues, when he's talking about this verse continues, I have been commanded to fight the people until they testify that there is no deity worthy of worship except Allah, and that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah, and establish the prayer and pay the zakat. This honorable ayah, Surah 9:5, was called the ayah of the sword, about which Ad-Dahak and bin Muzim said it abrogated every treaty and every term. Al-Afi said that Ibn Abbas commented, no idolater had any more treaty or purpose of safety ever since Surah Bara was revealed. The 4 months, in addition to all peace treaties conducted before Bara'ah was revealed and announced, had ended by the 10th of the month of Rabi al-Akhir. If this is what adults learn about jihad, what are they teaching children in Islamic schools about jihad? So what is said in a 7th grade history textbook for Muslims will shock you even more. They have a book called What Islam is All About. It addresses jihad in a chapter titled The 3 Duties. Jihad is listed as the 2nd duty. This section states that the 1995 attack on the federal building in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, was done by a Christian terrorist, and that afterwards several masjids were burnt down. Muslim homes were vandalized, and the FBI news media were fingering Muslims as the responsible party. Timothy McVeigh was not a Christian. The FBI never said that was an act of Islamic terrorism. In fact, they were pretty silent until they knew what happened. No mosques were burned down, and Muslims' homes were not vandalized. But why was this said if it was not true in a kid's history book? The purpose was to create the belief that there are Christians who are terrorists and that people will wage war easily against Muslims. Think about it. And senselessly kill them. That was the purpose of putting that in the book. According to the Quran, quote, if you kill a life, it is as if you killed all life. Of course, the life in question is of an innocent person. Quran 2:190, 2:229, and 1690. There are 3 problems with this quote. The verses cited are indeed of interest also. Surah 2:190, and fight in the way of Allah those who fight you, but transgress not the limits. Truly, Allah likes not the transgressors. This verse is the first one that was revealed in connection with jihad, but is supplemented by another verse, Surah 9:36. Surah 2:229 has to do with divorce. How this fits makes no sense. Surah 1690 is also strangely vague. So why did this chapter, again, this is in a kid's textbooks, what were they doing? Why do they cite verses that don't connect to the topic? Because they teach Muslims who do not read the Quran unless you know Arabic. So again, they think they can fool the Muslims. They're so good at lying to us. They lie to each other too. This part of this love of deceit allows Muslims not to know the truth. That's part of the problem. So if you don't read the Quran because you can't read Arabic, you're losing out. The Muslims should learn, they should just read. And then they should ask questions. Is it the same in Arabic? And go and find out for yourself. But I say go read it in your language first. Let me keep going. Why did they cite the verse that doesn't connect the topic? Okay. The third part of the sentence, of course, the life in question is of an innocent person. The word innocent is code for believers in Islam. It means Muslim. The verse quoted comes from Surah 5:32. Again, why is it not cited? Read and find out. Okay. Because of what we ordained for the children of Israel, that if anyone killed a person, and again, what did it say? For the children of Israel, that if anyone killed a person not in retaliation of murder and to spread mischief in the land, it would be as if he killed all mankind. And if anyone saved a life, it would be as if he saved the life of all mankind. Indeed, there's come to them our messenger with clear prophets, evidence, and signs, even after them, that many of them continued to exceed limits by doing oppression unjustly and exceeding beyond the limits set by Allah by committing the major sins of the land. Think of this reference now. They are talking about Jews doing the killing. On top of this, the 7th grade textbook tells the Muslim children that this reference is killing Muslims. One paragraph later, it states, however, the word jihad is most often associated with the act of physically confronting evil and wrongdoing. Hence, it can be applied to the act of fighting as well. Surah 3:110. But the goal of jihad is not to have a big war, gain riches, or kill people. It is to further the cause of Allah and to create justice on earth. Surah 5:8. Then, when the evil is removed of the other side, wants peace. We are to make peace as well. This book continues. A person who engages in jihad is called a mujahid. Again, this is a book for 7th graders. A person who engages in jihad is called a mujahid, or struggler for Allah. Allah also explained to us why fighting is sometimes part of jihad. He said, let those fight in the cause of Allah who sell the life of this world for the next life. To the one who fights in the cause of Allah, whether he is killed or achieves victory, we shall soon give him a great reward. And why shouldn't you fight in the cause of Allah and those who, being weak, are mistreated? The men, women, and children whose only cry is, our Lord, save us from this land, and whose people are oppressors, and bring to us from you someone who will protect us, and bring us from you someone who will help. Those who believe in the cause of Allah and those who reject faith fight in the cause of evil. So fight against the friends of Shaitan. This is exactly XYZ. The standard Islamic narrative has been completely debunked. This book, when I've exposed, again, the 7th grade textbook that says this stuff, I'm going to recommend you pick it up. Again, the title of the book, if you're going around and speaking on the dangers of Islam, and you're saying, I recommend you order it. You can find it on Amazon or eBay. It's called What Islam is All About. And this past week I did a little thing selling my books, and I was showing that to people, and they were shocked that this is the kind of stuff that is being taught in Islamic schools in the United States. But it shouldn't be a surprise to us. It really shouldn't. It's not like they haven't been telling us. Let me continue here. The duty of Muslims here is communicated to be one where physical fighting is permitted against unbelievers. Not stated anywhere is why there is a statement that jihad is not for the gain of riches or killing people. In Western civilization, war is seen as a last resort after talks have failed, or what happens when someone attacks without reason. The thoughts of getting rich never enter your thoughts, but before the time of Muhammad, according to Sayyid al-Maududi in Jihad in Islam, one of the causes of pre-Islamic warfare was a love of booty. I sat there, I heard that, like, well, that makes sense. You think about that time period, yeah. Maududi claims that Arabs before Islam found regular work demeaning, but loved battling to steal the wealth of others. Maududi also wrote of the Hadiths, where Muhammad claimed that the purpose of jihad is not for money, it is for honor, and it is not for war's sake alone, rather is for the cause of Allah. He says jihad under those Hadiths is not self-defensive. Its purpose is the spreading of Islam alone. Here's one such example of what he said. He wrote, this is Maududi, he wrote, a person said to the Prophet that there were those who undertook wars for gathering spoils, some for making gains in respect and power, and other to establish a reputation for bravery. After stating this, he inquired of the Prophet as to which of these was in the cause of Allah. The Prophet replied that only war alone was in the cause of Allah, which was to spread his word. So, if Maududi's correct here, and this hadith and others like it are accurate, the purpose of jihad is not defensive at all. Its sole purpose is for the cause of Allah. This statement could be equated with spreading Islam through the sword. But then Maududi believed he is writing only to Muslims, so to his communication is more direct. Moshe Khan's translation of Surah 3:110 is revealing also about who they, the jihadists, intend to battle. Moshe Khan's translation, here we go. You true believers in Islamic monotheism and real followers of Prophet Muhammad and his sunnah, legal ways, etc., are the best of peoples ever raised up for mankind. You enjoin al-Maruf, Islamic monotheism, and all that Islam has ordained, and forbid al-Munkar, polytheism, disbelief in all that Islam has forbidden. And you believe in Allah, and had the people of the scripture, Jews and Christians, believed, it would have been better for them. Among them are some who have faith, but most of them are al-Fasikun, disobedient to Allah. and rebellious against Allah's command. So let's look at one of the verses they skipped in Surah 2. Verse 98 is on the topic. This comes from the Sahih International Quran. Whoever is an enemy to Allah and his angels and his messengers and Gabriel and Michael, then indeed Allah is an enemy to the disbelievers. Let's look at Muhammad Sarwar's translation. And as a confirmation of original scripture, and whoever is the enemy of God, his angels, his messenger, Gabriel and Michael, would know that God is the enemy of those who hide the truth. Moshe Khan wrote, for this translated this verse, Surah 298. Whoever is an enemy to Allah, his angels, his messengers, Jibril, Mikhail, then verily Allah is an enemy to the disbelievers. So is physical jihad the only jihad? Perhaps one of the most important pieces of knowledge on jihad in Islam was hidden from the public by the American government from 1915 until the 1960s. In 1915, Ambassador Morgenthau sent a copy of a fatwa issued by the Caliph that led to a genocide of the Armenian people and much more. Ambassador Morgenthau communicated the violence in his autobiography, Dr. Morgenthau's Story, which is now available for free on the internet. Dr. Andrew Boston revealed this long-hidden fatwa in his book, The Legacy of Jihad, Islamic Holy War and the Fate of Non-Muslims, published in 2005. I'll tell you right now, if you're listening and you have an interest in obtaining a copy of this fatwa, find my email. I'll give it to you right now. It's Berean, BEREAN _research at yahoo.com. Go there and ask for a copy. I'll send you that fatwa. Okay, that fatwa proclaims extremely important information that many refuse to acknowledge, namely that jihad is not only a physical battle, but there are other levels. Jihad are indeed extremely dangerous and can at times be seen as more dangerous than an actual bloody confrontation. Level 1, jihad in secret. This is the easiest and simplest. In this case, it is to suppose that every unbeliever is an enemy to persecute and exterminate him from the face of the earth. There's not a Muslim in the world who is not inspired by this idea. However, in the Quran it said, again, this is from that fatwa. I'm quoting from the fatwa. However, in the Quran it said that such a war is not enough for a Muslim, whether young or old, and must also participate in other parts of the holy war. Again, from the fatwa. Jihad by word of mouth, that is to say, fighting by writing and speaking. This kind of war, for example, should pertain to the Muslims of the Caucasus. They should have commenced this war 3 or 4 months ago because their actual position does not permit them to but the carrying on of such warfare. Every Muslim is the duty bound to write and speak against the unbelievers when the actual circumstances do not permit them to assume more stringent measures. For instance, in the Caucasus, therefore, every writer must use his pen in favor of such a war. This is also referred to as jihad by word. Physical jihad, again, from the fatwa. This means actual fighting in the fullest sense of the word. This kind of war is also subdivided into 2 parts, the lesser and greater war. Even today, several imams in what some would call moderate Islamic countries openly state that jihad cannot be ended. Their reference is to a violent jihad. The Middle East Media Research Institute translated a YouTube of Kuwaiti Imam Sheikh Naji Al-Kharas, which was uploaded on August 21st of 2020, a sermon that told the world that all the Arab peace agreements with Israel and the Jews, including the Camp David Accords, the Oslo Accords, and the Jordan-Israel peace agreement, are null and void because they abolished the jihad. He elaborated that it is impermissible to sign a permanent peace agreement with the enemy because jihad cannot be ended. Now, I have more in here. And again, I'm going to recommend, if you're interested in, I put this together to look at social norms. I did it from an academic point of view because I was working in academia. And now I can say more of what I want to because I'm no longer there. I couldn't have read that out loud back then. But I was posting and sharing this information, and it just never ceased to amaze me how much hatred there is in Islam. I know I'm running out of time, and and I need to talk about the other great people out there, like my friend Eric, who does a show Sundays and Tuesdays. Tomorrow we have Dr. Andrew Herod on the network, on Black Talk Radio's Global Hatred Radio Network. You want to come back and see him tomorrow. He's on around noon. Saturday we have Usama Dakdoc. You'll definitely enjoy him if you. He's a late night guy. Come up at 10 o'clock. This is 10 o'clock Eastern time I'm talking about. Definitely want to listen to his work. And Sunday again, Eric. And Monday we have the Real Radio Men, Alan Vito. Definitely want to come back and listen. Tuesday, Eric's back. And then with Cross and Crescent, you can watch him on YouTube as well. Wednesday, we have Hank with Polysports. And then Thursday, I will be back. I'm working on getting another expert on CRT back, because in New York State and across this country, we have people now claiming that the states that there is no CRT in being taught in public schools. In fact, I have something said on this in in the teachers union. I want to say thank you all for listening, and I have to say goodbye. God bless you all. Good night.